Hey, what's up guys? This is the second video for section 8.5, which is using the distributive property in order to factor a polynomial. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of review, factoring a polynomial is kind of like undoing the distributive property. So if you guys see the polynomials on the bottom of the screen here, I have a binomial and a trinomial. Well, you guys want to factor this polynomial into 2 factors or maybe 3 factors. It's different every time. But you want polynomials that will multiply to this polynomial right here, to that binomial. So the factors are for this specific binomial right here on the screen. So if you distribute it, you guys multiply, you guys will get this back. And the trinomial, same thing. You want to find polynomials that will multiply to this trinomial here. So if you guys have these 2 factors here, negative 2ab is a factor and the parentheses is another factor. Well, you guys multiply, you distribute, and you guys will get this polynomial back. Now today I'm going to show you guys how to factor quadrinomials, which means 4 terms, and we have something called factoring by grouping. It's just a few steps you guys can follow, and you will find the factors of the quadrinomial. So first, let's understand how to factor by grouping. So you guys see the definitions on the top. This is just something I wrote for you guys. But factoring by grouping is used when you have 4 terms and you are going to make 2 groups, 2 factors. That's why it's called the factoring by grouping. You make groups. So I give you guys an example here, and it's already done for you guys, the work. But you guys will have a quadrinomial. So this is a quadrinomial. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So to factor by grouping, first, step number 1, you are going to make 2 groups. Now, to make 2 groups, you're going to have 2 parentheses adding each other. So notice 1, 2 parentheses with the plus in the middle. And you guys will take the first 2 terms. So I'm just going to highlight the first 2 terms right here. And you're going to put those inside of the first parentheses. Then you guys will take the second 2 terms, so right here, and notice that I am highlighting the symbol, the sign next to the term 3 here, so it is a positive. So you guys will put a positive 3q plus 6. Now you guys don't need that plus here, but you guys have to know what sign this is when you substitute, because sometimes you guys have a minus. So if you have a negative minus 3q, you're going to have to put a negative here. But right now the positive can be invisible. So you guys have those 2 groups. Now you guys will factor the GCF from each group. So here you guys need to know what to factor, just like the previous video. You find what number goes into the 4 and the 8, and you're looking for the greatest number, the greatest common factor. You also look for the variables, which variables they have in common. So you guys can factor out a 4r. When you guys do that, you guys will have inside of the parentheses q plus 2. So you guys factor the 4r. And same thing here, you guys factor a 3, so that one's outside, and you guys have a q plus 2. Now the idea, guys, is when you get to step number 2, first of all, the 2 parentheses, this one and this one, have to be equal. They have to be the same binomial. If they're not the same, if the signs are different, the numbers are different, you guys have to go back and check your work. Maybe there's something wrong, but they have to be the same binomial. Now, the other idea is when you guys also get to this step, you guys will factor out the common factor. Now, you guys can see 2 terms, and I'm going to highlight the 2 terms. Let me just change colors here. I'm going to use a purple. So this first term right here, you guys can see that it has a parenthesis of q plus 2. And let me highlight the other one. And I'm going to highlight this one here. And you guys notice that the second term, or the second part, has a q plus 2. Same, that's what they need to be the same, because those parentheses you can factor out. You guys can take out from that step. Now, I don't really do that. What I tell you guys is when you guys get to this second step, some students get confused when I tell them to factor out the parentheses. So the easiest way I found to tell my students is you guys will write the 2 binomials multiplying each other. So notice, multiply binomials. The one that you guys can factor out, or the parentheses that's the same, you guys are going to write it down here. So you just write it down once. And I know you have 2 parentheses, but think about it. When you guys factor this out, you guys will have only one term. And I guess I can show you guys here. So I'm just going to do that for you. But this is just something extra for you guys to understand what happens. So if you guys have this right here, and you want to factor out the cube plus 2, so this one here and this one here, you guys factor out, well, you guys will have a cube plus 2 outside of a parenthesis. And what do you have left when you take those two out? Well, you guys have the 4r and the plus 3. So that's why you guys have those two binomials. Now, does order matter? Not really, because when you guys have multiplication, community property says the order doesn't matter when you multiply. So you guys can have this order here, 4r plus 3 times q plus 2, or you guys can have those binomials backwards. But very important that you guys remember, you must multiply the two parentheses. Now, something you can also do, if you don't want to do this work here, so let me just erase all of this here. You guys can look at the terms outside of the parentheses, and you put it inside one of the parentheses. So 4r here, plus 3 here, and this one just goes on the second parenthesis. And that's your answer. You guys have those two binomials. What does it mean? Well, we actually undo the binomial, the distributed property in order to get the polynomial. So what I mean is, if you multiply 4r times q, you guys distribute, you're going to get 4qr. If you multiply 4r times 2, you guys will get 8r. 3 times q, that's going to be 3q, and 3 times 2 is 6. So if you guys distribute, you guys will get that polynomial. It's a quadrinomial. You guys will get it back. Okay, so let's try a few examples here. So all of these here are quadrinomials. You guys want to factor. Now the first one, notice that you guys have x squared plus 3x plus x plus 3. Now you might be thinking, well, can we combine the 2 in the middle, 3x plus x? Yes, mathematically you guys can combine those like terms because they have the same x and the x has the same exponent, but we don't want to do that when we factor by grouping. Remember, we are trying to undo the distributive property. So don't combine. You guys just follow the steps that I showed you guys on the previous slide. So you are going to do step number 1. And for step number 1, we are going to have two groups. So there's one parenthesis. Here's the second parenthesis. I'm going to write down the first two terms in the first parenthesis. So I'm just going to copy those down. I'm going to copy down the next two terms. This one's here is a positive x plus 3. So positive x plus 3 in the second parenthesis. I'm going to go back to the first parenthesis. So step number 2, you guys will factor out the GCF. So I'm looking at this binomial, and you guys can factor out an x. So when you guys factor out an x, you guys will have an x inside because you took out one x, and plus 3. So you guys took out this x, it's outside, you don't have it inside anymore. Over here, you guys do not have a variable in common, and you guys have an invisible 1 here. Now think about it. If you guys have an invisible 1 here and a 3, so what is the greatest common factor for 1 and 3? What number goes into 1 and 3? Well, the only number that goes into those two numbers is 1. So you guys will factor out a 1. But guess what, guys? We already have a 1 here. There's an invisible 1. So I'm just going to put a plus here. I'm going to put a 1 right there. And I'm going to have an x plus 3. If you guys factor out a 1, nothing is going to change. If you guys factor out a negative 1, that's going to be a little bit different. And we'll do the one in a little bit. But you guys, if you factor out a positive 1, everything else stays the same. So this binomial stays the same, x plus 3. Step number 3, you guys are going to put the two binomials together. So notice I'm not going to tell you guys to factor out the GCF, the greatest common factor, but I'm going to mention it. The two parentheses are the same, x plus 3, x plus 3, so that's the one you factor out. So that's going to be in one parenthesis. And the two terms that are outside of the parentheses are going to go inside. So I'm going to have an x plus 1. So I'm going to have this one here and this one here in the first parenthesis. and I'm going to have x plus 3, the one you guys can factor out, or the one that's repeating, the x plus 3 goes in the second parenthesis. You guys don't need it squared. You guys do not write it down twice because that's the only one you guys can factor out. So my answer is x plus 1 times x plus 3. So when I ask you guys, factor the following polynomial, that's what you need to find. You need to find two parentheses or maybe two polynomials that you guys can multiply. You distribute using the distribute property, and you're going to get this polynomial back. And you guys can distribute if you want. You can check, but we're going to get this back. If you guys don't get that back exactly the same, that means there's something wrong. So you guys always have to check once in a while and make sense of the problem. Now the next one, same thing. You guys will do step number 1 here, and I'm going to make my two groups plus in the middle. I'm going to take the first two terms right here, and I'm going to put it inside of the first parentheses. And I'm going to take the second two terms right here, and I'm going to put it in the second group or the second parentheses. So I notice that I can factor out in step number 2 an a from here. They have an a in common, and 2 is the greatest common factor. So you guys will put parentheses here. I'm going to have a 2 outside and an a, because the 2 goes into 2 and the 4 goes into 2, and the a is what they have in common. So let's go ahead and divide. 2 divided by 2, that's going to be 1. You guys took out 1a, so we have an a left inside. And guess what, guys? We don't need that 1 next to the a, so I'm just going to erase it here. And now I'm going to go to the next one, minus. So I'm going to bring down the minus here, and I'm going to divide 4 by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And you guys took out the a, so no more a's over here. Now this one, there's an invisible 1 here, there's a 2 here, they don't have an a in common, and the 1, well, you guys can factor out a 1, but nothing is going to change. So I'm going to put plus parentheses, and I'm going to put the 1 outside, a minus 2. I put the 1 outside because remember we do have an invisible 1 here, and that's going to be a lot easier for you to see what number goes inside of the parentheses. So now you guys go to step number 3. And step number 3, you guys will do your two parentheses, multiply, notice nothing in the middle. You guys will take the first, the terms outside, so 2a plus 1, that's going to go inside the first parentheses. And the parentheses that are equal, remember these have to be the same, you guys will put it in the second parentheses. So we have an a minus 2. Now, once again, if you guys distribute, if you multiply, you will get this polynomial back, and it is a quadrinomial. And another reminder is, if you guys have like terms right here, you don't have to combine. Mathematically, you can, but when you factor by grouping, you don't have to combine. You just want to factor, right? So let's try the next one. Next one here, you guys have two different variables, an x and a y. You guys have a quadrinomial. You guys cannot combine the ones in the middle. Notice 3xy plus 6x, those are not like terms. So you don't have to worry about that, but you do have to follow the steps that I show you guys. So step number 1, you guys will make two parentheses right here. There's your two groups that you're making. I'm going to write down the first two terms, 9x minus 3xy. And then I'm going to write down the next two terms, positive 6x minus 2y here. Step number 2, you guys factor out the GCF. So I'm looking at the first binomial. I can factor out an x, not a y, because this one doesn't have a y, but I can factor out an x, and I can factor out a 3, because 3 goes into the 9 and 3 goes into 3. That's the greatest common factor. So 9 divided by 3, that's going to be 3. I took out an x, so I'm just going to have an x left, minus 3 divided by 3, that's going to be 1. I took out the x, but I do have the y left. And I don't need that 1 next to the y, so I'm just going to have a minus y. Over here, I can factor out a number. Yes, we do have a greatest common factor. So I'm looking at the 6, I'm looking at the 2. We can factor out a 2. And look at the variables, x and y are not the same, so you guys cannot factor out an x or a y. You just factor out a 2. So 6, you start dividing. 6 divided by 2, that's going to be 3x minus 2 divided by 2, that's going to be 1. And you bring down the y. Once again, we don't need that 1 next to the y. Check the parentheses, 3x minus y, 3x minus y. They are equal. So we are ready to write down our answer. So my two parentheses right here, guys. Remember the terms outside, 3x plus 2, you put them inside one parentheses. And the parentheses that's repeating, you just write it down once. Mathematically, you factor out that term, but that's the answer. And I'm just going to do a couple more, guys, just to practice. You guys, you have another quadrinomial here, and you guys just want to factor. So notice this one has two different variables, a d and a t. So we have to be careful what can we factor. So I'm going to do my two parentheses here. And once again, this is factoring by grouping. You guys are going to write down the first two terms here, 3dt minus 21d. You guys are going to take the second two terms, and you're going to put it over here, 5t minus 35. And you guys factor. So I'm going to factor. Let me see the first one here. I can factor out a d. They do have in common, so let me put that outside. And I can factor out a 3. So 3 goes into 3 one time. You guys took out the d, so no more d's here, but we have a t. So I'm going to put a t right here. And we don't need that 1 next to the t. So you guys will erase it. I can't erase it anymore, guys, but imagine you guys don't need it, the 1, but you guys have a t. Minus, and 21 divided by 3, that's going to be 7. And you took out the d. Now the next one, you guys can factor out, let me see the numbers, 5 and 35. You guys can factor out a 5. And t, nope, you guys cannot factor out a t because this one doesn't have a t. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. T minus 35 divided by 5 is 7. Now check the binomials, the two parentheses, they are equal. So you guys are ready to write your answer. So I'm going to have my two parentheses right here, guys. The ones outside, remember 3d plus 5. That goes in the first parentheses. And the t, remember I don't need that 1 next to the t. So I'm just going to write down t minus 7 goes in the second parentheses. Okay, so this is factoring by grouping. You guys have 4 terms. You make 2 groups, and then you guys factor the GCF from each group, and you write your answer as the product of 2 binomials. Product means multiplication, so you are multiplying the 2 parentheses. All right, now the next one. The next one is a little bit different because, first of all, you notice that we have negatives in the beginning of the parentheses, and we also have a minus over here. So that's going to affect the steps a little bit. Not a lot, but I'll show you guys what to do. So you guys start with the normal step number 1. You make 2 groups, factoring by grouping. So those are my 2 groups. I'm going to write down my first 2 terms. So notice we have a negative 4b squared plus 12b. And then you guys write down the next 2 terms, negative 2b plus 6. Now, remember those negatives? So this negative right here, every time you guys have a negative at the beginning of the polynomial and you're factoring, you need to factor out the negative. And this one also have a negative at the beginning. So you need to factor out the negative. So step number 2, I'm going to have my parentheses right here. The first thing, I'm going to take out my negative right there. I'm going to look what I can factor out from the variables, and I can factor out a b. And the greatest common factor for 4 and 12 is 4. If you say 2, you're kind of right, kind of wrong, because 2, it is a common factor, but it's not the greatest common factor. So 4 is the greatest one. So you guys take out a 4 and a b. So you guys are going to divide, and careful with the signs, because remember we have a negative 4 here, and you guys took out a negative, so you're going to divide by a negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4, that's going to be positive 1, and we have a b left inside. We have a positive 12 divided by a negative 4, that's going to be negative 3, and then you guys took out the b. On the next one, remember you took out the negative. Now think about this, guys, math sense, number sense. If you guys have a positive already outside and you took out a negative, a positive times a negative, that's going to be a negative. So I'm going to put a minus right there. You guys are going to factor out a 2 because that's the greatest common factor. So we have the 2 here, and not the b because the 6 doesn't have a b, so you guys cannot factor out the b. So we have a b, 1, b, Remember, you guys are dividing. A negative 2 divided by minus, that's a negative. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. And positive 6 divided by negative 2, negative 3. Now check the two parentheses. Yep, they are equal. So now we are ready to write the answer. So step number 3, you guys are going to put your parentheses here. And the two terms outside. So we have a negative 4b. And we have a minus 2 right here. And then the one inside, you guys have a 1b minus a 3. So you guys think you're done. But guess what? We're not done, guys, because you always have to check if you can factor something else from the binomials. Now, this is kind of like reducing fractions. When we tell you guys, math teachers tell you guys to reduce, we tell you guys to reduce all the way until you guys cannot do anything else. So here is the same concept. You guys have to factor all the way until you guys cannot do anything else. So notice here, guys, we have a negative in front of the binomial. So we have to factor that one out. And if you guys look at the numbers, the 4 and the 2, you guys can factor out a 2. So that means that we can go one step further. Even though we have 3 steps done, we can actually do one more step. And this is what I want you guys to do. Check if you guys can factor out something else. So this negative is going to go outside. So there's my negative. I can factor out a 2. So inside, I'm going to have a positive 2b. Remember, you guys divide negative 4 divided by negative 2 is a positive 2. And negative 2 divided by negative 2, that's a positive 1. And over here, guys, b and 3, you guys cannot factor out anything. That's already done. It's already factored all the way. So you guys just keep that one the same. So we have the parentheses, b minus 3. So the actual answer, guys, is all of this right here. The negative 2 outside times 2b plus 1 times b minus 3. Alright, guys, so this lesson here is really long, so I'm going to have to make a third video for this section. So make sure you guys check that one out. And if you guys like my videos, hit that like button, and you guys can subscribe to my channel as well. And make sure you guys practice, and I'll see you guys later.